right, it is 5:30. I will call the meeting to order. Let's see. First thing we have is the Broadway and Main parking lot. Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I think Chad's gonna actually get us kicked off, and then I'll provide some technical support.
That's not the order it says here. Chad.
So public service staff informed me that there was an issue with some parking in front of 117 Broadway, or what we call the PU building. So I brought our concerns to the city manager and the engineering team, and we developed a pretty good plan going forward, just to get a little bit more organization at the Broadway Park.
Yeah, so what we did is we put together a layout for that, what we're calling the parking lot area now. Right now it's kind of, what else, I'll say no man's land. There's kind of just a big mass of pavement out there that is kind of hard to see, you know, where you could legitimately park, where you shouldn't be parking. So what we tried to do was clean this up to the extent possible that we could, while still respecting the fact that public services needs to be able to get in and out of the building with equipment, you know, trucks, materials, that kind of stuff. So what we had determined was we could leave this is about 31 feet is what we have, a gap in here. That would be no parking, and that would give Chad and his team enough room to get in and out of the various bays in the building, what they're using the building for today. So I think that Chad and his team got a little creative in how they can stage inside of the building. But what this does is it really cleans things up. It provides 8 defined parking stalls on the east side of the parking lot. So essentially it's 8 more stalls than what we're having today, which is a very good thing.
Just sorry to interrupt here. Just for perspective's sake, the city's maximum width for a driveway is 26 feet wide. So 31, that's kind of the width that you're talking about for backing up trailers, et cetera, et cetera. So just a reference point for you.
My 21-year-old son might say it doesn't say you can't park right in front of the building.
It is on the building.
There's signs there, actually.
Okay, so, I mean, if you're striping it, I'm just saying.
We can have Chad call him. No, there's actually signs right on the building.
All right,
No.
as long as it's well marked.
So there's a few other things going on. The Getaway Motor Cafe, obviously it has the building on the corner there. What we try to do with this plan is allow kind of some sidewalk seating per se in this condition, which that does. There's an existing sidewalk there that's about 6 feet wide. We provide an offset with a gore striped area kind of between where the parking stalls are and the sidewalk, so creating a little bit of a separation distance, so things aren't so congested. You don't have car bumpers that are overhanging the sidewalk, and that lines up with the lot configuration too, because the area to the south, I'll call it, is grass right now, so it kind of mimics the kind of that corridor, I'll say, of either a gored off bituminous area or a grass area. Just to the south there is an existing garage here, so that's currently striped off. That's still maintained in this condition, and then as well as there's a sidewalk connection to the front door of this home that preserves easy access in and out as well. As far as these last 2 parking stalls goes, we maintained a buffer distance here, so cars that park in here could get backed up a little bit easier and start to get turned so they can get out. Ideally, things would be a little wider back here. You'd have like a bump out here if it was, you know, a new construction, but we feel this would be adequate for kind of this interim condition, understanding that we're trying to keep costs down as much as possible too. So all in, we're looking at probably a $10,000 or $15,000 project out here. Chad's also looking at possibly even buying a striping machine, which they've been kind of talking about for some time now. And if that's the case, there could be some savings on that front too. So, but think of it, in that $10,000 to $15,000 range is what we're thinking it's going to cost. So.
You wanna show the other section?
Oh, yep. So as we were looking at this, we kind of took it as an opportunity to clean up Main Street a little bit more. There used to be striping out here for the parallel parking. Those stalls have since been, the markings have worn off, so we'd clean up the striping on Main Street as well. Basically back to, oops, it's going really slow. Oops. So it bumps out and the curb is wider here, so that would be parallel parking. And then similarly on the north side of the road. After you get past the corner here, where Greg Witt's place is here, this needs to be no parking just because of truck turning movements. So for large semi, tractor trailer combos coming around this corner, the trailer drag is in this area. So we can't have any cars parked in here. So we've started after this driveway here. So that would be parallel parking from there to the west.
Is that grass square just past Greg's marked right now? Where's it marked to say no parking from here?
It says no parking from here back right now.
So, but the trucks are getting around the corner now, right?
The trucks are getting around the corner now. There's really not,
I know they are because I used to live on that street.
there, I don't feel comfortable having one parking stall here. It's just so tight that,
That's fine.
yeah, so that's really the reason. And then on this side of the street, we have to have no parking near the intersection just so the stop sign is visible. So that's what this area is marked up for.
And it's currently marked that way.
Correct. There's a sign right here on the corner of off the corner of the building that says no parking from here to corner. So that is matching the existing condition on that side of the street.
Aaron, why aren't there hash marks in the no parking on the
On
north
this side?
Yeah. Or what did you call it, gored out?
Gore striping,
Sure,
yeah.
gore striping.
You really don't need it. I think, that's more just kind of like a shoulder stripe on this side. So you see like a fog line just for a regular shoulder on a road.
Also, so much of Greg's garage in that area is not a curb, so you can't park. The only spot you really could park on that stretch is that little grass area. The rest of it is an entrance into his shop.
It's already depressed, yes, yeah, that's
If
true.
we have our own striper, we could have it.
Mhm.
Yeah. If and when we see there's an issue.
Yep. So that's really the project in a nutshell that we'd be looking at doing and looking for feedback and
Do you want to touch on our resident meetings?
yeah, so we actually met with Greg Witt, the Hartleys and the Royces about the plans, and they were all really it was positive feedback. There's no major issues that came up during any of those meetings, so they thought it was a good idea. Obviously there's been a lot of kind of confusion that's gone on down here since the opening of the business, so I think they all realize that it's a good thing to bring some order to that area, so.
You wanna scroll on to the photo too?
Yep.
Please.
Oops. Is that the second page?
I think it's the last page.
That's it.
Here we go. So, yeah, so obviously this is a scenario that is not sustainable for getting in and out of the building. So what we'd be looking to do is kind of where those middle cars are parking, that's where it would be hashed out saying no parking. And then Chad's also thinking about doing some things. We'll have to see how things go, but even adding some mobile signs in there if it gets to that point. In the summer, talking about maybe even doing a planter box or two in that area to kind of spruce things up a little bit and make it a little more defined on where your hard stop point is for the parking. So.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, in the winter when there isn't bare pavement
Yeah.
down there, we
Yeah.
might need something, but we can play it by ear. I like this. And I appreciate how quickly everybody has moved on this. The Getaway's barely been open for 2 months and we saw a problem and now we're dealing with it and it's adding more parking downtown. Any
It's
other thoughts?
defining, I don't know what's adding, they're
Wow.
already there. I have a couple of questions and comments.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna point here, so this dark gray rectangle, is that grass under that right now that's gonna get pushed back?
Correct, we have to pave that little piece just so it's deep enough for cars.
Okay. My other question is because we have the no parking sign, or no parking hashtags that basically break it in half. Did you look at what it was like to have all the parking spaces and either have them like come out the end
Mm-hmm.
rather than have it broken in the middle with 2 down at the end? I only say this because once winter comes, this is great in the summer when we can all see the hashtags, but once winter comes, exactly how do we gauge where that opening is?
Mm-hmm.
So if it was just, the opening's right here or it's right here, does that help for months besides the summer?
So the main reason that it's kind of centered is just purely for turning movements for the vehicles, just to maneuver in and out of the bays of the storage building. So if you put it all on one end, it's kind of hard because then you basically have to back all the way out, which is not desirable. That's kind of dangerous. So you will ideally want to be able to drive out. So this allows for, you can back up this way and then drive headlights out.
Okay, I have a kind of a big idea that's not on this plan. What if, I'm gonna have to stand up because otherwise it won't make sense. What if we took this and made this a drive-in and then this was all parking? Because you're coming out,
There's a hydrant and a light pole. Or
there, right there,
This
there's,
is a power pole right here.
okay.
Good idea.
Outside the box idea, right? Outside of all the hashtags.
But in front of the hydrant.
Yeah, okay, so that doesn't work, okay. Is 5 feet gonna be enough backup radius there? Because I know, doesn't that go down a little bit for the grass on the right-hand side? So when they back out of these stalls, is 5 feet enough?
I would say that's probably the minimum we'd want. As I mentioned, you'd want more if you're gonna lay it out new, but I think if we have stalls here, people are gonna use them, so that's why or if there's pavement there, people are gonna wanna park, so we tried to bring some order to it, but still try to get as many cars in there as we could.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'd eliminate 2 parking stalls, essentially, is what would happen.
So I'm looking at this again with where that no parking is in the center, because we have kind of a visual natural barrier where the grass comes down with those first 3 parking stalls. Would it make sense to move the next 3 down so all 5 are on that end?
So the no parking's right here.
Yeah, and I know you said for some of the turnaround, but I don't know every piece of equipment you have in there. I'm sure there's some that can make the turn from 4, but maybe.
Possibly. One of the big concerns is door number 1 we only use in the winter. Door number 2 is a wash bay, so we're constantly in and out of that. And it's a heated pressure washer, so it's exhausted or vented outside. We can't move that because it's on a brick building. So that one is very important to stay as is. And 3 and 4 are kind of the storage bays. So we have vehicles in there.
It may help to explain what's in Bay 1 because that can't really be moved either.
That's it's a 2,800 gallon brine tank and our brine making machine. So it needs to be close to the door so we can dump salt in it, and it's right next to the 2-inch water service in the building. So
Right, but if we were to if those are the big ones, if we were to take these 3, put them here, you would have even a straight drive-in on that one.
but we don't
And then
need
watch.
we don't need access to door number 1 unless it's winter time.
That's permanently installed in the building in that
Yes.
bay, so
Yep.
you want more flexibility to bays 2 through 4 to get
Correct.
equipment in and out, right?
Okay.
Correct. And door number 2 is our wash bay, so at any point during a week we could have 4 or 5 vehicles going in there.
Okay. I'm just trying to look into the future as to what people are going to do, like what's the human nature gonna do when they get down there. Like I said, for me, that grass area creates kind of a natural sightline barrier, but if it doesn't, I mean, if you're telling me that it 100% does not work to have the opening in front of Bay 1,
That's what we,
I'm saying.
yeah, I mean, what we.
but I need to hear that.
Yeah, so my preference was similar to yours, Christie. It's just what I got back from the team was that they need the most access to bays 2 and 3, and so that's where the space is, because under normal circumstances, you'd want all that clumped together to make it feel more like a space. And all of a sudden, you just have this big no parking piece in there. It wasn't my first choice, and I think Aaron kind of had a similar sentiment, but because if you look at even, I mean, if you had to push down to the park piece, I mean, originally, I was a big advocate for just trying to get it to look as much like the park concept and not just kind of doing that phase and making it look more like this. Because in, any number of years it might look different down there, but trying to find that balance between the storage building and parking needs was more challenging than I think we all thought it was. We probably had 3 or 4 meetings that were at least an hour or 2 long on a parking lot, so your thoughts are well heard, because I don't know if there is a perfect design layout for this. It is a little bit clunky.
We've talked in those meetings about trying to delineate the parking too, to make it a little bit more obvious of that's like planters in the summer to kind of box off the area for the drive lane. I don't know what those things are called that you put at the front of a parking stall.
Those like bumpers, like the concrete bumpers.
Yeah, the bumpers, like we did at Community Park.
Yeah, okay.
So just, we've troubleshot that, and I think we're open to ideas, that if we try something and it doesn't work and you have another idea, I think we'd be open to trying it to make this space work.
So what is the plan for the winter then, to make those apparent? When
So we
can't see
talked a
the
little bit
hashtags?
about signage, like corner signage, so
Okay.
putting, I forgot what the thing that you had, but basically like a bollard sign that we place on the 4 corners. Because we talked about the concrete stoppers, but for snow season, that's gonna be rough, because they're gonna, get hit by the plow, etc.
Okay, as long as there's a plan, because you'll be able to see it. And then I do have something for the Main Street part, if we can go back to that.
Keep going down.
That's probably good for right now. So when we're looking at the length of those parking stalls, so when I was Googling, but anyways, it was saying usually they're 22 to 26 feet in length. So 26 seems to be the maximum. Is there a reason that we're putting it at the maximum, where if we get down by Lisa Mosley's house there, we've got that little bit of curve. Are we, if that shoves down a little bit farther, are we gonna be able to fit in another spot if they're not at 26?
That's a good question. I was just thinking more of a lot of the cars that we see around here are like half-ton pickups. They're 19 to 20 feet long. So I just thought that 26 feet was a little bit more applicable to what we see around town. So that's why I picked it. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. There's also a lot of, just normal sized vehicles. So I don't know. I want to maximize, because one thing that we've all talked about is trying to maximize our parking down here. This helps with this, but I want to make sure that we're not being a little bit overly, we're making them really big, and then when we're missing another spot or 2 or 3.
Yeah, I was just teaching my kids to parallel park, and me too.
I guess 15-year-olds are the right example.
Bang, 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 bang. You got it. So no,
Don't bring them to Carver.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that I'd also look at is what is this road in the future going to be? Generally speaking, if you got a road that's going to carry more traffic, you kind of want to be able to get in and off really quickly. Or Minneapolis, you can shipping back and forth, and it's sort of expected that people are stopping. So the more traffic that's coming by, probably better to get them in and give them some room to park, but it is tolerable to go either direction, so it depends on what this road's gonna be.
What, just so I can get a visual, like, let's say the angle parking that's right over here on the street, how deep is that?
How deep is the angle? Aaron, do you remember off the top of your head?
Well,
What are
on the angle, you're saying?
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get a visual of lines to a vehicle.
So a standard parking stall, like if you're doing perpendicular parking, is 18 to 20 feet deep.
Okay.
So if you think about that, say if you have a 19-foot long half-ton pickup, you don't have that much room to be able to get in and out of there. It's tight. So
The angle parking is there a specific question there?
No,
on
I'm
that?
just
'Cause
trying to
it's a
get
whole
it-
different
I'm-
on the district. I'm trying to think of what that is.
I realize that the angles can be very different. I'm just trying to get a visual in my head of the length of a car and what that line looks like next to it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, your vehicles are, yeah, if you get a compact, 26 is a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, to that point, there's some flexibility.
So if, how many spaces are there along there? Like, this keeps shutting down on me every time. I try to count.
So maybe the question, Christie, is how much do you have to contract all the other spaces
Yeah.
that create the additional, is it foot per space?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I suppose if we went down to 22, so just figured do the math
9.
here, we got four times. Yeah, we need 5. You know, we need to contract 5 spots to get one.
Yeah.
Parallel
Okay.
spot is what we have to get into.
And the hash shakes that are next to the building, does it have to come that far? Or if we were, let's say we went down to 26 feet, and then we move that no parking from here to corner a little bit
This one?
farther? Yes. Can we fit another space in there? I know it seems silly to like quabble over space, but we know how parking can be down here, and every space helps.
Yeah. So the biggest thing with that is this. So right now the stop sign's right here.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a tough angle for sight distance. So one thing that Chad and I were kind of kicking around last week was, well, where could the stop sign go to make it a little bit more visible?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we could, once we get out there this summer, we can definitely try to optimize things as much as we can. I think we all understand that we want to try to get as many stalls along that stretch. So if we could move the sign out a little bit more and then use some of that kind of space on the bottom that you were talking about here, like maybe you could get one more stall out of this side then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that might be
It's
a comment that we can leave on the table and we can say, well, here's what we can do.
It's not a huge deal to move that stop sign, is it? Into the sidewalk?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I could see us picking up one more, if that's the comment that you.
Yeah. Mhm. I have one more, and this is for the stop signs, actually. Can we get the little signs on them that say three-way stop? Because now that people are going straight, I've just heard a few people talking about the stop signs there rather than, so we don't have one coming down this way on Broadway, so you have that little square sign at the bottom that says
Yep.
three-way stop, four-way stop, two-way,
Like
can
traffic
we,
from the left doesn't stop.
or something, can we get a little
Traffic.
sign on there?
Yeah.
Well, not to bring up old issues, but I am bringing up an old issue. I mean, the council at one point wanted that to be a 4-way stop. You're perfectly, you have the authority to do that if you wanted to at this point because the road is yours.
I'm not looking for that right
Okay.
now, I just think a little sign there that, so that people coming in have just that extra little reminder that this is like a through traffic spot here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Anything else?
that's it.
Lori? Say Lori?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Okay.
So if somebody does park where it's no parking, what do we do? Like, there's a ticket and like, what's the fee? We're gonna hear somebody's like, I just got a $300 ticket, or I got towed.
We don't tow for parking. I'd have to look up what the fine is for parking,
Okay.
but it would be just similar.
And it
to-
would come from the sheriff's office.
Correct.
Okay.
Nothing. No city staff would issue it.
Okay.
Ticket. It would.
Although I've asked.
Courtney the meter maid.
Alright, and then, do any of these spots have handicap? Do we need to? Is there guidelines where there's a requirement? I don't know about that at all. I just,
Right. So what we talked about that briefly, there's not a requirement. It could be connected to like a certain business might need to have an accessible spot, and a lot of it is, from what I understand, based on the most direct access that that person would have to that business. So it might not be directly in front of their building because their accessible entrance is on another side of their building. So for example, like the Getaway's accessible entrance is on, I would say the Main Street side of their building. So at some point that if we move that gore striping up, that might end up being an accessible spot because it's right next to their accessible entrance.
so is it fair to say like we've looked at it or we've considered it and there's a need for it?
We've looked at it and there's not a requirement to put it in. The need would be relative to
Whoever speaks up,
Right.
yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I like the plan, I'm comfortable with it.
And interestingly, that 31 feet actually lines up well in the future to doing a handicap plus an access aisle, just with the dimensions. So that's something we're thinking ahead for, but it's
Okay.
not in the plan right now.
Which 31 feet are you talking
The
about?
31
Parking?
feet, so say someday the building goes away, you could have 3 9-foot stalls and a 4-foot access aisle for a ADA stall in the future.
What is that little, as the sidewalk comes down, what is that little dash piece, the little white building one, up?
This one,
That, yeah.
stop bar.
Okay.
Eric? Thoughts?
I think we've covered it pretty well. It's an engineering compromise. I would have liked to have the no parking shifted down, but it sounds like the turning radius of the vehicles prevents that. So, and it's a temporary engineering compromise, so I'm happy with it.
All right. Do you need anything else from us?
So just
Some warm weather.
for expectations, this will be kind of we'll follow this plan of field fit. We'll make adjustments based on comments, but this won't be coming back to the council. So if you have additional comments or something comes up, if you want to share them now or bring them up at a future work session so that the rest of the group can vet it.
So we just
Christie
get
down
those-
to supervise this, I think.
I will. And do you want me there in the morning or in the evening?
Yes.
All of the above? Can we get that sign though for the stop sign sooner than later?
Yes.
Okay.
One quick question, Christie's additional spot, we'll put a sign for that.
Yeah.
But does it have to be 25, does it have to be the same size
That's a good
as
point.
the others? Because if you shaved a foot off the other ones and it didn't make that 25 or 24 feet of compact, it's still part.
Yeah, for sure.
So it doesn't have to be the same size?
No.
Okay. Sorry, that was minor
No, it's okay. Okay, moving on to the Southwest Infrastructure Service Area trunk line update. Mr. Lattis and Ms. Smith.
Okay, well, this is an update to our last discussion, so a lot of it's review. Just gonna tell you what we found and get some additional feedback, and we'll have primarily one major ask here as far as next steps. So this one should be pretty straightforward since you've seen this a few times. But where we are in time is we've talked about this a great deal, trying to decide, is this worth pursuing? Why do we need to do it? What's the intent here? And we'll just rehash that to a certain degree. But I think we got to the point where we do need to figure out whether or not there's any applicability to applying an area charge here. So we had that first discussion here, that work session in January, that was really all about what we found from the numbers. How close are we, how realistic is this area charge to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish? At that point, we were basically presenting that we know what the numbers are, they're high. And so we found out that we might have to go back and get some feedback on this, and that's really what we did. So we got your direction to go back and talk to the developers, get feedback, hear from them. Is this even worth doing, putting out there? Do we have a fatal flaw? And so that's what tonight's going to be about, is what do we hear from the developer here. So Last meeting, we talked about the southwest area, infrastructure trunk line, that's the one we're going to be talking about the most. You gave us the go-ahead to communicate this conceptually with the development community, which we did. And then we talked about the southwest area infrastructure gap, which is a portion of that project we indicated was really a capital project in many respects. We considered almost an oversizing element of your system. And so it's less cost that we would apply to the area charges, how that would work out. We talked about the big woods, that's the north area, and basically got to the point where the numbers were just really high. And the direction was, we concur, it's not worth spending additional time on something that we probably can't make the math work on. And then should the 212 sewer crossing be considered for inclusion in the next revision in the long-term financial plan, which is effectively a jacked pipe across 212 that opens up a service area over there. The determination was, yeah, we should be thinking about that in the CIP, which should be upcoming discussions here. So that won't be the focus. Really, number 1 or number 2A is the gist of today. So what did we hear? We're going to set up a meeting with Casey from the current name of their development, Summergate. And so he has a lot of land holding in that area, and obviously is the biggest driver to an area charge being a very big element of whether or not this area can open up. And so we were certainly interested in his take on it, is what's realistic. And so we got his feedback, we bounced lots of ideas off him, and it was open discussion back and forth on what made sense from our perspective. And as a developer, what would make this possible, and what would make it stay as it is, which is really not a developable area. So first thing was very key to us, and when they speculate development, they're looking at a payback, a rate of return. And so we had 40 units per year in our model, in terms of the number of permits per year. If we were to put this big trunk line into place, how many permits a year would be realistic to assume that they're going to start paying back through our area charge? That gives us our cash flow for the bond. And his take on it was he doesn't think he would proceed if he thought he could only do 40 units a year. That's a really slow rate for a developer to pay back their investment in a development. And so it's very helpful from the perspective of, we both need to be thinking about this the same way. If he can't go into this unless he's going to get 60 a year out of it, it gives us a little bit more confidence that we should be getting 60 a year out of it. And so he thought 60 plus is most realistic. And so we upped our payback assumptions on the development to 60 a year, which again, he indicated should be about the floor before he would say this is worth it from a developer's perspective to start selling units. And then the area charge, how big is too big? If we tell them $10,000, is that going to stop them? If we told them 15, what's that threshold? Is that all of a sudden another community, another area, it becomes their focus because the math won't work? And his take was, they see numbers in the 5,000 and below on a regular basis. That doesn't tend to scare away a developer quickly. They'll run through it. When you start getting over 5, you get to the point of that actually is the difference between sales when people are buying homes. This is well, I guess now with the numbers you're seeing, 865,000. This one's 870. I mean, numbers are getting pretty big. So 5 is becoming a much smaller number. But it is from when you're selling lots. That was the threshold where their thought was that would start to matter between different areas. And so all of this is just input. It's by no means guiding us to the degree that we have to follow it. We can pick whatever number we think is appropriate. It just means, does it solve the problem that we're trying to solve, which is allow this to be developable. If we do all this and he says it's not going to happen, we should agree it's somewhat of a waste that we pursue it. So this is a range that he felt was pretty reasonable. One of the things he did comment on that is of significance to us is attempt to minimize having one growth area significantly more expensive by rates than another. So if we start to have huge disparities between the north and the south area, say they're looking at up here, they can sell that for 100, and down here it's going to be 110 because the charges down here are so much higher. It's going to pretty much put them in an uncompetitive situation to the degree that those area charges might actually be problematic for their willingness to invest. So his preference, and that doesn't mean this would be the case in all, it would be the trunk area, the trunk charges for across the community is the ideal way for them because everybody pays the same towards the project. If they're all equal, but he said area charges are common, and if they're below 5, it can be realistic and palatable. So multi-year process to shovel ready. That's one thing. It's a good takeaway. Even if we did this year, assume 2025 is probably the earliest that anything is going to happen. It takes a couple of years for any of these developments to proceed. So that would be sort of a known but confirmed. And then begin the financial model reviews and concept bond issuance here. So what we got out of that is adjust the build-out rate to 60 units per year. Bond term is one of the topics for today. We started to think, this might play off as an average of over 60 units a year over a long period of time. So 25-year did not seem out of the question when you're considering the area that we're talking about. So you'll see some things on the bond term and payback period for the area charge. So, and we will continue to receive development inquiries and consider what additional feedback we get. So I can feel free to ask any questions along the way if you'd like. But
I have a question on that last slide about the recommended for the term for the bond.
Yeah.
Who is that? As the city engineers or the developer or finance? Like,
I would
or is
say.
it a little too soon?
Lynn down there is
Oh.
definitely going to have
I
some
didn't
thoughts
see my
on
Lynn.
that. And Brent is.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're
Suppose we'll
working
check
with
through that.
our municipal advisor from Northland Securities.
Okay.
And then we'd want it to line up too with other bonds that we would be taking out in the same year.
Okay. So not just this project, but the city as a
Yes.
whole. Okay.
Part of the strategy is understanding that the benefits are going to far exceed that a typical 20-year issuance, and so there just seemed to be an opportunity to extend it by 5 years, which would align with collecting that trunk line revenue for another 5 years. One of the pieces that we discussed with Summergate too is a concept where they would prepay their trunk line fees. So let's say they had 100 lots, that they would prepay their 100 lots of trunk line fees in advance as kind of a down payment, and so that the city council would have some type of assurance that the investment in infrastructure would be followed by development of housing. So if you're, not to like jump to the end, but that would theoretically, if you're supporting this concept, would be the next scenario is Aaron Smith would start conversations when they're ready to go, that would be part of the next steps, if you will.
Were they agreeable to that? Is there a term for that? Like, I want to call it, but I'm sure there's.
I would just say it's
Something
probably
like
not really a term, it'd just be a prepayment of trunk line
Okay.
It's almost like good faith money when you're buying a house, right?
Aaron, did I miss anything that you wanted to throw out there from our discussions?
No, just anecdotally, Casey was pretty excited about the idea of it. I think the valuable feedback we got is having a north area that's more expensive and south is not a great idea in his eyes, just because everyone then would push south pretty quickly. So that was good feedback that we hadn't necessarily thought about when we're thinking about the two areas, just having the two competitively. He said he couldn't sell a house north, he probably wouldn't even try. So.
But isn't north gonna be built out here by the time?
He's thinking north as in north of 212.
Okay.
And-
Sorry, the Big Woods area.
Okay.
And then if the city would invest in putting an that sewer line under 212 with that open residential, and so he was worried about competing with that area, and competing with that area in addition to the kind of the area by the school.
I get not wanting Carver, North Carver to compete with South Carver, but beyond the trunk fee, we're kind of at will of what land prices are, right? There isn't much more that we can move the needle on that. Okay.
Well, the investment that Carver, the city would make in extending that sewer line is significant, because if that area won't develop without that sewer line.
Right,
So-
but if, for whatever reason, West Carver becomes available and there's only so much of this that we can control.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is a very valid point, and one I brought up, because, in theory, the land prices might be lower down there because there's so much investment, and, they would
Yeah.
have to factor that in to a degree, and I know he does, but he still said you can get too extreme.
And one of the clarifying points we made was, if the city council wants to invest, let's say the number is 4 million into that southwest area, there's likely not gonna be an appetite to invest another million in the north area. It's like you're gonna wanna make sure that your investment into that infrastructure in the southwest area has as much opportunity to pay itself back before trying to spread out and develop in another area. If you don't think that's correct, then let me know and I can say the opposite.
But Courtney, I agree with you when we're talking about developers and things like that. We don't control what their stock and prices are. They buy the land, they make the money they need to make. We
And
can't
that
control all
doesn't
of it.
worry me, because I know that the market, they're not gonna be, the folks, West Carver knows what South Carver is getting, and they will. Like, they're not gonna say, oh, I'm gonna sell you my parcel for a song, like, it's just, so, but let's just make sure that we're okay with what Brent just said, that understanding, in my mind, we're gonna make a really significant investment in kind of South Carver, if you will, for this, but not wanna do a parallel or tandem path to making any other investments north of 212.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think it would be too hard to split the focus and.
I'm more worried about the money,
And
yes.
money, yeah, and just, what we have to work with. Okay, but yeah, I'd be committed to only one, and I like what I see for the south.
Okay, which I think is what we said in our previous meeting, but I just wanna make sure that we're still continuing to.
Yeah, I don't wanna overextend. I already have a little bit of nerves about what happens if the market crashes and we're stuck with this bond and nothing's happening. All of us were around when it happened the last time. So what happens?
But and the flip side, we also risk if we don't
Absolutely,
plan or if
absolutely.
things are favorable.
I think that's the significance of getting the deposit is you have some level of insurance, if you will, for X amount of years to have that paid back, but you're absolutely right, if there's some type of catastrophe in the market, it comes back to, rates, because you're not gonna pick it up through connection charges, because there won't be any connection charges, because, no homes are being built, but, so it's, analyzing that risk and determining where you wanna be at, because that's, the same comes true if you don't do it and then we're landlocked on housing and then rates and charges go up to pay the water treatment plant back as well, so it's kind of a never-ending carousel of risks and rewards.
Having that kind of guarantee ahead of time is really, with what we're talking about, is really important to me, because I do not wanna sit and look at open basements of townhomes for 10 years again. So that was not great after that happened, but, so if we can do that, that makes me feel at least partially more comfortable that something's coming right away.
Yeah, and that's where, Lynn and, at some point you'll meet Tammy from Northland, they've really been doing a good job, and we'll be able to set up some structures for you to look at once we get an idea of what the fee might be and the deposit, where you could get a sense of, will this get us 3 years of debt service, or 5, or whatever that amount ends up being. So we can go over different levels of scenarios and risk with you.
All right, well, I'll keep nosing through this here. And get the numbers as updated. So, Aaron, I kept some of your slides, and if there's any questions on it, but I didn't really have a whole lot other than a note that we'll read this, and if you have any questions for Aaron on our current inventory or what's planned, feel free to ask them again. But again, these are review slides to the point of what we were just talking about, what might happen with no action. So, and then we kind of talked about the fact that we've done our checks on legalities here. So getting into the weeds again, the southwest area here, this is the yellow is a capital CIP project, considering oversizing. And then the pink would be subject to the area charge. This is the actual project.
Can you go back? So when you're saying the pink is subject to the area charge, Carmel Lane, Kristen Lane, Mount Carmel, there's already homes and residents. So.
This is just for the new development area, not those existing homes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this area.
So just the Summergate area.
Okay,
This isn't for any homes that wouldn't be in the city.
okay. It was just, that was pink also, and that, so I think.
No.
It's just the right of way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, so
What?
asking the same question, is this pink area, with the exception of existing homes, where we would be charging the?
Only as development occurs.
Okay.
So if at some point they connect to water and sewer, they'd be charged an area charge and a connection fee.
Okay.
But only if they wanted water and sewer from the city.
Okay,
Because they're developed, so they're not part of the annexation agreement.
They are,
Yeah.
they
They
can
are.
be annexed, but they have to petition to be annexed.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Yeah, and I'll change the colors of this. I'll say this is yellow, this is red, and then this is the pink service area. So we don't mix up pinks here. The pink is the service area, and it would apply to the connections until the bond is paid back, and the city's right to continue that area charge
I'm
throughout
sorry,
the entire
one more
area.
question, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. That is essentially all of South Carver,
Yeah, but
potential, future growth area.
But going back to our last discussion, remember, it would take 100 years of
Yep.
connections at a normal rate to actually pay that back. So it's assumed that we'd end up having at 60 units a year. It'd be something like this type of smaller area that would develop to pay it back. Your bond would be paid back at that point,
Yeah,
and
but
then the city could reassess the area charge.
that is pushed east to west in that area of our future growth area with the annexation agreement going.
As they petition to be annexed.
Yes, yes.
We've had this with, I think, at least one township resident. Like, there are not gonna be any assessments or any charges related to any township residents unless they petition to be annexed into the city and request city utilities. So if this indicates that infrastructure can serve that entire pink area if need be, but they have to petition to get it, so they won't be forced to pay anything.
Yeah, as we talked about a while back, this is generally win-win. They have an opportunity they didn't have if this is on the books, but they don't have to pay it unless they move. So, the detailed,
You said paid unless they move.
unless they
So, like-
move on development,
Oh,
I'm sorry,
okay.
act on.
I didn't know if it was
development.
like if you.
You get out of there,
Okay,
I'm sorry,
got it.
poor terminology.
It's pink, it's fine.
Getting a little loose. All right, so the details. This would be the job that you would see in probably some upcoming CIP discussions. And the red is the area charge extension that is just purely a gap that has to be filled with some large trunk lines.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yep.
We mentioned this the last time, I just want to point out on the picture on the right, you'll notice there's a roundabout there. So the county had plans in was it this year, Aaron? 24 to build turn lanes at that intersection of 40 and 11. And they pulled that back, understanding that we're investigating bringing infrastructure down there. So there is a window of opportunity where the construction of our infrastructure and the potential development of the full build out of that intersection, which would be in connection with that development, could create some cost efficiencies because you'd be excavating of one trench, if you will, and installing it all together. Or if they happen separately, you know, it's more expensive, and then just from a kind of a practical kind of sense, you're gonna have folks wondering, you know, why you did put the pipe in 1 year and the roads in the next year. I don't know if you've ever heard anything like that, but, so we're working a lot with Carver County, but just wanted to kind of bring that back into the fold, that there's another project kind of sitting out there that we're trying to connect with this one.
Yeah, that's a good point. Probably hear about that
So
in
does
the
that mean
future.
they pull the trigger on a roundabout at the same time versus just turn lanes?
No, so the roundabout only comes if Summergate develops, and then Summergate is paying a pretty heavy share of that improvement.
Okay.
But if we don't put in the infrastructure and Summergate doesn't develop, then the turn lanes go in, right?
What comes first?
And then if in 2 years we decide to put in the infrastructure, then those turn lanes get dug up and the whole
Okay.
intersection gets
It's all in here. Okay.
It's kind of frankly, it's a little bit similar to the window was a little bit bigger, but at one point, if you can remember,
Yeah.
6 or 7 years ago, turn lanes were put in at JCP and 6th and Dahlgren, because there was some concerns about bypass lanes, et cetera, so some turn lanes were put in, and then obviously when we did the full JCP project, the roundabout was put in. It's really an identical circumstance to that.
Yeah, yeah, we try our best to avoid that, and, you know, we can't always, but it's still hundreds of thousands of dollars that ideally you don't spend twice, so. Southwest area costs, we're looking at about a $4.4 million project. About 800 of that can go to the city capital project, and the area charge would be based on 3.6 million. So we've run through these calcs before. I'm just going to get to the bottom line. When you switch it over to 60 units per year and 25-year bond and payback period, you bring our area charge from about $7,000 down to $4,000, which gets us into a pretty palatable place. So those are some pretty big assumptions. I mean, obviously that would be subject to additional discussion, and now isn't necessarily the ask to determine the answer. I think we basically laying it on the table that those are the upcoming topics if we were to proceed with this. What this is a check on viability, and we feel that if you get into a 25-year period, that project number and the 60 unit per year payback, we feel this is actually viable to the degree that we could consider putting this out there. I mean, that's the final step here for everyone. It's saying we're done, we're going to put an area charge, it goes public, and then at that point, you know, you're going to be official, and developers can start to do their math. And so that's really the end zone on this effort. So and then of course on the north side, what we came up with is the 212. The 212 crossing is just a 30-inch jack casing pipe, and that would be included in a future CIP. It opens up everything you see in green. So our recommendations, and I'm going to turn it over here, is provide direction to staff, or not, our recommendations are laid out there, but this is somewhat of a next step. It's to provide direction to staff and a process timeline for next steps in the South Area Charge. And so what our ask would be is, do you want to continue to carry this forward to a more formal presentation, evaluating everything we know into a plan with a recommended area charge? And so that's really where we stand here is, do you want us to continue moving forward as presented with these numbers basically being proofed out as viable? And we'd be seeking your open comment on, do you want to see this again?
Thoughts, questions?
Why did the interest rate drop from 5 to 4.5?
I think you guys had just estimated
Yeah.
it, and then you touched base with Tammy and found out that 4.5 was a little bit more accurate, and that's even high from what it actually.
Is that you getting us to AA+?
Yeah.
Well, probably the overall is we overshot it in our estimations on cost, and, sometimes when you start getting overly conservative, you can throw the numbers to the degree that it's probably not reasonable for us to carry forward, so we're proofed out more against the finance rep.
Anything else, Derek? Sorry.
Sorry.
Can you go back to that cost slide, Dan, please? The one that had the table.
So now we're under, right, they wanted, 5,000 was the ask, we're at 4,000. And this starts 2025? When do we think, is that still the right number when we?
Well, we would post the area charge as we calculate it, and if we come to a future council meeting, for example, we are gonna say this is the area charge that we would publish. Then there would be an assessment with the developer on cost, and then we'd have to basically come up with a project cost. That charge can be reassessed if the project costs were 70% of what we assumed. We have an opportunity to reassess that.
Okay.
But yes, this is what you would go public with.
And I asked the wrong question, it was how long are we beholden to that, and can we make a change? Because that time out before we would start, so you publish this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I can answer that without to get myself into too much trouble, is you can publish it, it can be revised by the council, and in the future, you have an opportunity to revise that as well, but again, we can make note of the question and make sure Dave, your attorney, has an opportunity to chime in on that to confirm.
And it really doesn't become a thing until you actually order a project to be done or infrastructure in the ground, because there's nothing to charge if we don't move forward, or the city doesn't move forward with doing an infrastructure project. So, be following?
I am. So general answer is I'm all for taking the risk. We talked about this in the last discussion. We have to believe in the city growing, and I think that investment in the Southwest development is the right choice for the city to do that. We have to be attractive to developers, and I'm happy that you had that conversation. We got that feedback that we did, because we need to sell Carver to them just as much as they need to the people in the buying and development. So I'm happy with this.
Thank you. Lauren?
Yeah, I support it, mainly because we just really need to invest in our infrastructure. And the decision is, where, and I'm comfortable with that direction being the southern part. So, and I like that we're getting input, and I'll probably need help, knowing when it was recommended at 20 or 25 year, who recommended that? What is finance experts tell us? What do engineers tell us? What is the developer hearing in the marketplace? Because I feel like we're going to be getting input from different areas, and then ultimately have to make some decisions.
Christine?
I'm good, I don't have any additional comments.
You talked about the Highway 212 sewer crossing. There wasn't a number for that?
We're sitting at about 1.2,
1.5.
Aaron and I are always a little, you never beat Aaron's number.
Yeah.
He's not usually going to be low, so
Yeah.
1.2 to 1.5 is probably
Yeah.
where we're talking for biddability.
Okay, and I'm sorry if I'm forgetting this, but how are we paying for that?
That would be in your capital plan, so
Okay.
that would end up being a project that just gets financed through Lynn's recommendations.
Okay.
We just throw that tough one on there.
Okay.
How are we paying for this land?
Okay.
Think of it in terms of, you might, if we expand our long-term plan from 5 years to 10 years, you might say we're gonna do that sewer connection in 2030, and that'll be incorporated, rates and connection fees, et cetera, to fund that. At the time, the council would choose whether to bond for it or do it in cash, depending upon the health of the fund balance at that time.
And then, kind of to the questions that Eric was asking, we can say a number tonight for the trunk fee. And then once we kind of figure out the financing, that's when we lock in a number, and we have a number that does not change for the duration of however long it takes us, well, 25 years. Or into perpetuity while we're recouping these.
As far as Dave's actual response, that can we set it and then change it in year 2? I'm not sure I could commit to that one. The intent is once you set it, I mean, that's the payback rate that you're committing to with this developer for an extended period. After it's paid back, I believe we have got some flexibility as to whether or not you would remove the area charge. But that being said, yeah, there's a second stab at it when we actually bond for it.
And Lynn will work with Tippy. There's some inputs related to CPI that you can adjust that based on, payback, because $4,000 isn't going to have the same value 25 years from now that it will today. So.
Right, okay. And then, looking at this full area, I think you said we don't anticipate this to be built out in 25 years, right?
Correct, 100.
Okay, so how do we get enough money in 25 years to pay off the bonds?
That's the $4,000 number.
Yeah.
For just whatever fraction is built out,
The 60 plus.
and then we're still collecting on properties in this area?
Not
You-
after
Why
the
am I not?
25.
You could, but you could, but it's not necessary.
Okay, so it's potentially the first $3.6 million in payback in trunk fees worth of properties that we'll be collecting on.
Correct.
And that's just kind of luck of the draw if it's here or there, wherever those properties end up being.
It can be any connections as they occur.
Okay.
Once we hit a certain connection count, then the math would be, in theory, going to work to pay it back.
Okay, and then getting way ahead of ourselves, we could come up with, as a council, a decision not to charge the existing homes for this trunk fee if they wanted to become part of our sewer and water. Could we not?
What do you
Could we
say?
come up with a policy of,
What do you mean existing homes?
Small Carmel?
yeah, I mean, any of the existing homes back there?
I don't foresee a reason someone would petition to annex their one property into the city.
Okay,
And they only pay when they connect.
right, but you're
So
asking.
we wouldn't mandate they
No, I'm
connect with,
asking
based on
if we-
area charge.
I think we'd have to connect with Dave on that, because they'd have to, it's, we a little over my skis here, but a little equal protection as far as, you're gonna say the new homeowner has to pay it, but somebody who is also not in the city doesn't have to pay for it, so we'd have to come up with a justification why they're any different. Because they haven't paid into the system either, and they're still benefiting from the trunk line.
Okay, okay,
No, I see what you're asking, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
just because we have had a one-off resident off of JCP who came online within the last 6 years, I believe.
Yes.
So we've seen crazier things, right, of folks.
Yeah, I'm not saying it
Not
wouldn't.
that it was a crazy decision,
Yeah,
but.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think.
Do you want us to check that?
Yeah. I think so. Just see if that's something, and I'm sure that none of those folks may have plans on making the decision, but rather than waiting 25 years, it would give them an option. But I do see now that we're talking this through, why that would be an issue of having a existing resident versus a newer resident not pay.
And when you say existing, not existing, you mean a resident of the township?
Existing home.
Existing.
Existing home, okay.
Yeah.
That's not
Thank you for
redeveloping
Johnson.
is
Yeah.
what you're getting at. They're just a single person, they're not gonna subdivide or anything.
Correct, yeah.
it's just-
Somebody who's
they just-
living at 1,
They just
2,
wanna
3
go
Mount
connect
Carmel
because it's
Road.
here, yeah, okay.
And maybe everybody on that street, if they've got failing well and septics and they wanna come in, they're still gonna have to pay whack and sack fees. But if
Okay.
we, and I, just again, thinking way too far ahead, but if we wanted to come up with a policy decision about that,
No, that's an applicable question, yeah, or comment, so, yeah.
that's all I had.
Okay.
Do you have a direction you need from us on this?
Do you wanna see it again at city council?
When?
That's the next step at this point. Is, would you like to see this at a council meeting with a more formal, almost adoption adoption recommendation and next step right in front of you.
I do.
That's what I understand the next step is. I think we're all giving you a thumbs up for that, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's it for me.
That's it, that's a wrap.
Thank you, good night.
Keep it moving here.
Okay, let's see, we're still doing okay for time. Zoning ordinance update. Oh, or are we doing okay for time?
I think Aaron's presentation is a little bit longer than we have time for in this.
Okay.
Is yours, what, 20 minutes or so? Or do you want to try it?
I don't know, it's a,
Because I have,
The way I look at it is you have 15 minutes.
that's right. And like, we
And you
don't
have
to
something
have
too,
that.
are you gonna do that, but wait, there's more?
I have a pretty big list of council updates, so.
Okay, then I won't do that.
No, I can do it at the regular meeting. Your stuff is more important. Oof.
That's what we decided.
Okay, let's have some fun.
That's where the recommendation came from. Aaron.
Okay, so as you all probably know,
Thank you.
the planning commission has started some work on our zoning code in earnest. They're doing a really excellent job. I think some of you have seen the meetings, that they are actually kind of fun, talking about the zoning ordinance update. So let's talk a little bit about it, just talking through what is zoning. So chapter 50 of our city code is where a lot of the planning commission, their work resides. So it's the rules essentially that they need to apply to new developments in Carver. And then the planning commission obviously offers recommendation to you as a group on zoning issues. So what is zoning? It's the separation of incompatible uses. So if you think about a residential property owner, it ensures that you likely will not be next to an industrial user that could be harmful to your health. So it provides different spaces for different uses in the zoning code. It regulates the type of user on the site, not the specific user. So we can say we want a commercial user, but we cannot say we prefer Target to Walmart. You have to allow for a type, not a specific user. And something I talk about a lot that I probably should stop or give some more context to is a bulk regulation. Talk a lot about the bulk regulations of a development, but what that means is things like setback, building height, dwelling units, things that are related to that specific site, typically found in the zoning ordinance. Something that's tricky that I think we think about a lot is that every use needs to be allowed somewhere in a community. So even those sticky users that you don't want inherently in your community, we need to allow for them somewhere. So things that come to mind, like an adult bookstore or tobacco shop, are two things that people often talk about saying, we don't want it here, keep it out of Carver, we need to allow it somewhere. I think one of the best and worst parts about zoning is that it is fact-based. So our zoning code is the rules. If it's not listed, it's not allowed, which can get a little bit tricky if you need to squint to make something work a little bit. I often ask Brent, like, could you maybe think about that? And he often says, like, no, we need to revise our code. And then I usually find a way to think about the project differently. But it's fact-based, so things that are allowed, things that are listed are not. So that gets a little bit tricky, but it also makes planning commission's meetings run really well, and we often don't deal with things like neighborhood disputes in that room just because we rely on facts together in chapter 50 of the zoning code. Two maps that planning commission uses a lot, but you also use our zoning map and our future land use map. So zoning is what's in the city today. Future land use map is in our comp plan, the area that we're going to grow into, annexation area that we just talked about quite a bit with the area charge. And another way to think about that is things, what we know and what we think. So zoning is what we know to be true. It's what's in our community today. The future land use map is what we think will be in the community at some point. So it's the big ideas that we have extending out to 2040 with our current plan. So thinking about zoning is fact, what we know, future land use, what we think, our best guess.
On that slide, can you remind me what mixed use is?
So a mixed use community would be something with
example?
residential and commercial built together.
Okay,
So it's like a grocery store with apartments on top.
got it.
So the goals of the update that the planning commission is taking on right now is that our comp plan has come up with a couple new districts we don't have in our zoning code. So there's the dark purple areas in the northernmost portion of our city. That's commercial industrial mix. We don't have a zoning district that is a commercial industrial mix. So we need to create that chapter so we can apply our future land use map to the zoning. We also have talked a lot about in this room is updating housing. So making
Erin, I
sure-
have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at the future land, if you go back to that, please. There we go, the purple. So you said we don't have that currently,
Correct.
but it's showing on our future land use. So should we be showing it if it's not even a thing?
Yep, it can exist in our comp plan. Before a project were to come in, we would need to have that district.
Okay.
So important work that the planning commission is doing right now. We talk a lot about housing types and looking for housing for all. I would say our current zoning code is a little bit restrictive on limiting the types of housing that we can have, just rethinking it on the market today and where we were at with our city code. Another thing to think about is, I would say, your zoning code, what exists today that didn't exist 10 years ago? What are things that are important to us today? Something that's really important to me personally is cutting jargon and doing general cleanup. There's a lot of times where I read the city code and I don't understand it, so how can I expect a resident to understand it as I'm reading it out loud to them? And it's something as simple as, can they put a fence up, and I'm reading this long sentence that I can't dissect, so how could I expect a resident that is new to this to figure some of those things out? And then I think there is a responsibility to respond to the market we have in Carver today. So our zoning code largely was written, I would say several thousand housing units ago. So what has changed? What's important to us now that wasn't important? And also, who are we in the market? What type of developments do we want to see? What's important in those developments to us specifically? So going back to housing for all, thinking about that. The market is obviously driving a lot of what we're seeing in the community, but there are some pieces in our community now that aren't in our zoning code. So we hear a lot about a villa product. It's the detached townhome. It has the 5-foot setbacks. That doesn't exist in our zoning code anywhere. We don't allow for it, so it has to come in a PRD or a planned residential development. So what does it look like if we do allow that villa market somewhere? Is it that medium density? Where does it live? What does it mean for us? With the increased densities that we have in our updated comp plan, we can see greater conservation. Potentially, we could see lower home costs because you can fit more homes on less land if they're more dense. And we could also see a different product type in our market. So taking this information from our comp plan and making it what we know in our zoning code is the leap that we're taking right now with the planning commission. Also thinking about, did you laugh at my robot? Yeah. So thinking about things that exist today, the world that we know it in 2023, that maybe did not exist in the last time we talked about our zoning code, so technology changes. We talked a lot about cell tower. What was it that we couldn't put them on our light poles?
5G.
Yeah, 5G. That was a hot topic for a while. Senior living is important. Walkable neighborhoods, that mixed use that we just talked about, with mixed use districts, and then thinking about co-working spaces, vaping and tobacco shops. So how can we encourage and welcome new users? How can we have an innovative user come in and meet with staff on day one, and we can say, our zoning code allows you to be here without having to go through an entire process to update our code. So what technologies can we recognize as being important in the market that we could support with our zoning code to say, we'd love to have you in our community, we've revised our code so you are a permitted user. Not saying that's a vaping shop potentially, but.
Mind if I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm hearing about from other cities, and I know there's one in Maple Grove, and Aaron and I talked to somebody who was interested in Carver, but single family rentals, which is something that just has never come up, but they're built to be rentals. It's not just like one homeowner decides to be rental, but the whole community or so whole subdivision is rentals, and so, there are different dynamics and nuances related to that are not traditional, and so just when Aaron had this slide up, it made me think that someday that might come in front of you, so.
It sounds very strange in my brain. It sounds really strange.
It is, yeah. So a goal of cutting jargon, this is one that puzzles me quite often. Brent has come into my office probably 30 times in the past 5 years to talk me through what a site triangle is. So it's talking about a fence requirement. So a site triangle shall not meet the triangular area defined as follows. Beginning at the point of the intersection of the right-of-way of two intersecting streets, thence 20 feet along one right-of-way line, then like it just gets so muddled and tricky that we often.
Thens mean then?
I think so.
I think you have to say that.
Still Larry's number in my phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Elizabethan English.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges of the zoning code is that it doesn't make sense to people inside this room, but also obviously outside. So how can we make it accessible to everyone, that they can at least start to get an idea of what the rules are? we can support it by explaining by how we got there, but at least having a shared understanding on some of the information. So a big push that we just did with the Planning Commission recently was defining and having shared understanding of 4 pieces that that group is charged with, which is variances, conditional use permits, planned residential developments, and planned commercial developments. It's like I could see in the future, but I only included 2 in this PowerPoint, because I think that we'll have a robust conversation in the future about PRDs and PCDs once we have some of those residential chapters drafted a little bit by the Planning Commission. So thinking through just variances and conditional use permits tonight. We did this at a Planning Commission meeting recently just because these are 2 terms that get thrown around pretty often. And I wanted the Planning Commission to have a really solid foundation of what they meant, when they apply, when they don't apply, and how they can make decisions on them moving forward. So first, talking about what a variance is and what a variance isn't. So a variance completely alters or ignores a portion of the zoning code for a specific property. The trickiest part about a variance is that you have to meet specific criteria that's written in our code. So I think a lot of people call the city, get an answer that they maybe don't want, and then they think, oh, I'll just apply for a variance. We can change the rules a little bit. But there's really specific criteria you need to be able to say, my property checks all of those boxes, and that's where it often gets tricky for us to say, it's a great project, but you don't meet the criteria of a variance. So they're trickier to get than I would say the average person thinks about it. So variance cannot allow a use that's not permitted in the zoning district. So I couldn't get a variance to have a Target on my property next to your residential because it's not a permitted use. It's typically things like I need a taller fence because of XYZ condition that is making my property hard to use or not usable. Another tricky thing for a variance is that it can't be granted if the person can use the lot as intended. So if I own a single family home and I'm able to use my property as a single family home, I'm likely not going to get a variance for a larger deck because I can continue to use my house as a single family home. The rest is kind of the extra where I can use my house for a home. And the difficulty must be unique to a specific property. So I can't want a bigger deck because I throw big parties where everyone on my block might enjoy throwing big parties. But we can allow larger decks for everyone if we're, say, adjacent to a bluff where we can't encroach into that property further.
Fun hater.
I know, I've been called worse. So when do people want variances? Pretty often because it's a way to get around the rules essentially. Why do people want them? Because the zoning ordinance is strict. It's black and white, it's the rules, it's fact-based. And when do we grant them? Almost never, because people often can't meet the criteria that's required. So what is that criteria? So our city code calls it out specifically that a variance needs to be in harmony with the ordinance, consistent with the comp plan, and this is where things get tricky with the practical difficulties. So the use of the property in a reasonable manner, not permitted by ordinance, circumstance unique to the property, will not alter essential character, and economic considerations are not the practical difficulty. So it's typically the piece that's the hardest is that it being unique to the property, just because we all probably want a bigger deck, we all want a taller fence, et cetera, so it needs to be specifically unique to the property, which makes variances in particular tricky to grant. Moving into conditional use permits, again, the jargon, it's a crazy block of text of what that means. So first order of business is cleaning up that definition, which we'll work on. Conditional use permits are a little bit different, where in each district there is a section that allows for different uses under a conditional use permit. So it can be allowed with conditions. An example that we talked a lot about at the Planning Commission was the former My Pillow factory, which had a conditional use permit, which had some struggles in itself, but that's the example that we all were relying on just historically. The conditional use permit stays with the property, not the person. So if Lori owned My Pillow and then I bought it from her, that permit would stay with the property, would not move with Lori. And there's some flexibility in what can be conditioned. So things to think about at a conditional use permit would be like what time the lights go off, what time truck traffic happens, number of truck deliveries. So things that we know might be an issue for something in a certain area, we can start to condition that and create rules for that specific property under a conditional use permit. But an example, so this is the Freeway Commercial District. You'll see section C is the conditional uses, so it needs to be listed in that section to be able to apply for a conditional use. So if I want to open a Freeway Commercial District, I'm in the Freeway Commercial District, I want to open a pawn shop, the city has the ability to apply a conditional use permit to that project. So we could say, you can have your pawn shop, but you can't have the neon signs, or you can't be open past 10 o'clock. So we're able to create specific rules for that use if it's listed as a conditional use. So public hearing is required, which I think is helpful, so you get neighborhood feedback. And we can move forward with some of those rules that are really project specific under a conditional use. So variance versus CUP, variance changes the rules, challenging to meet the criteria, but it does require a public hearing, which is great to get some feedback. Conditional use is, I would say, easy if it's listed again, if that pawn shop is in the freeway commercial district. We can condition specific uses or rules for a property. It just adds an additional layer of review and an additional permit. Again, requires a public hearing. So this is an example of what the Planning Commission has been working on with me. So shout out to all of them. We've had a couple meetings working through, this is the variance section. So we did the 101 on a variance, and now we're moving through the sections of the text to make it more applicable to what we believe to be true, but also cut a lot of jargon, obviously. There's a lot of redlining. So they're doing really good work. Dare I say we're having a little bit of fun occasionally too. So the game plan moving forward, we're going to continue work with the Planning Commission. If you see them, please thank them for the work that they're doing. They're doing a really great job. We had a thrilling discussion recently about how many semicolons you can have in one sentence. But people were engaged, and it was actually fun. Beyond that, we'll continue to provide updates to the City Council. I want to do a pretty big lift on the PRD, PCD section when we come forward with those residential districts to tie it together a little bit more for you, just since the Planning Commission is charged with Chapter 50. You are as well, but you generally have their recommendation to go off in their technical knowledge of Section 50. And then the council will review proposed changes at a future date for final adoption of the zoning code. So it's going to last for the next several months. So keep an eye on the Planning Commission meetings if you want, but we'll keep you updated here as well. I wanted that to be so much longer. I could talk about this for hours, but I won't because no one else wants to.
I have two things.
Can we talk for questions at the actual meeting? Because we have, it's
Yeah,
almost
it's
done.
not questions, it's just like feedback when you said you're gonna give updates again.
Mhm.
If you could let us know what variances you have, we, the city, have approved, and then also, do we have any other properties that are under a CUP right now? Just the future
Sure.
update,
Yeah,
include
absolutely.
those.
Okay.
We'll hold manager's report and council requests to the meeting, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Councilman
I'll
Carver,
second.
second